Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the program. Today we're going to talk about this recent research that's come out regarding climate change leading to a decline in South American populations 8,000 years ago. And so 8,000 years ago, to place it around 6,000 BC, according to other things that I've done, compared to other things that I've done rather. It's not though, but still, dramatic declines in populations all should be investigated and compared, or their causes should be compared to see what exactly was going on. And when they're saying abrupt climate change, that could mean something catastrophic may have happened. So new ECL research suggests that abrupt climate change some 8,000 years ago led to a dramatic decline in early South American populations. It's the first to demonstrate how widespread the decline was and the scale at which the population decline took place. We talked about the Younger Dryas, which is like one of the that poster child for as far as ideas go, catastrophic ideas go in terms of abrupt climate change that took us out of the last ice age. And stuff has happened in the interim between then and now at what I think, or I am inclined to think, are fixed intervals, meaning it seems to happen like clockwork, and I'll get into that in a second. And it has to do with the Greenland ice cores and other climate data that they have in terms of glacial periods and interglacial periods. And right now we're at an interglacial period, which means that the glaciers aren't as big as they would obviously during the glacial period. With that in mind, let's continue. Archaeologists working in South America have broadly known that some 8,200 years ago, inhabited sites in various places across the continent were suddenly abandoned. Yeah, so that's one telltale clue that if you had a massive population, which in previous videos, in this region in South America, they had up to 10 million, 15, 20 million people inhabiting certain parts of the area, or of the continent rather. So to have everything suddenly become abandoned, something must have happened, and it probably wasn't a sickness because the Europeans weren't here at the time, so something else might have happened. The study aimed to connect the dots between disparate records that span North Andes or Amazon. So they were trying to connect all these instances of these sudden population declines and try to connect them with a unifying either theory or conclusion. Dr. Rear that unpredictable levels of rainfall, especially in the tropics, appear to hurt pre-Columbia populations until 6,000 years ago, after which recovery is evident. So they went through a pretty bad period of climate change, abrupt climate change, and bad unpredictable levels of rainfall. So they didn't know when the next. Basically, they couldn't sustain those living conditions. So they had to rough it for a while, and then winter came and went, so to speak, and then they survived. There's a evident recovery. So the recovery, this is interesting, seems to correlate with cultural practices surrounding tropical plant management, early crop cultivation, possibly acting as buffers when wild resources were less predictable. Well, I don't know if maybe they were already doing this, and they just had bad, just the climate was so bad, even their early crop cultivation technology and management just couldn't cut it, even though they may well have been masters of it back then. The focus of the research was on the transition to the Middle Holocene itself that spanned 8,200 and 4,200 years ago, a period of particularly profound change when hunter-gatherer populations were already experimenting with different domestic plants and forming new cultural habits to suit both landscape and climate change. Okay, so this is interesting. 8,200, so about 4,000 years or so, more or less, give or take, there was this period where there's abundant evidence of experimenting with plants and farming and cultural habits to suit both. That's just advanced agriculture, I would say, or just a agriculture period that they were practicing, and it's evident during these times. So that's about 6,200 to 2,200 BC. So if that's the case, or 2,800 BC, I think. my math is wrong. Well, anyway, that window of 4,000 years, I find that very peculiar, especially when you think about precession of the equinoxes and this record of glacial and interglacial periods. And it just has me wondering, why is it like clockwork this way? And it probably is has to do with precession. So let me just bring this up right now. So here's the precession of the equinoxes. So if you don't know what it is, the Earth sits. There's a tilt in the way it sits on its axis, and because of that, there's a wobble, and that wobble puts the Earth on a precessional cycle that lasts 25,920 years. So not quite 26,000 years. And this number is very interesting because when you divide it by 12, which is 12 is the number of the different ages or the different constellations that pass through the precession. So right now we're at the age of Pisces, and we're about to cross Aquarius. But anyway, 25,920 divided by 12 is 2160. So 2,160 years, basically, for each of these ages. So here's this graph here. This is a generalized temperature curve for the surface water of the central Caribbean. The numbers above the horizontal refer to, I don't know I can't make out that word. But as you can see, the further you go back, you can see this obvious pattern here. This is a sea surface temperature. So it rises and then it falls. It rises and it falls. Glacial, interglacial, glacial, interglacial, right? It clearly displays a regular succession of glacial and interglacial ages throughout the late Quaternary. So why is it like this? Why is it like clockwork? Well, again, I think it is because of the orbit and the Earth's changing position in relation to the sun and its position in the solar system. So because of that, I think we can kind of predict when winter is going to come, when it's going to go, or when the glaciers come, when the glaciers go. And not only that, even more specific. So when inconsistent rainfall is going to come, or when dry periods will come. I think those were the type of things that the ancients were aware of. And the reason why I think that is because they were aware of the cosmos. They seem to know about precession. They seem to know about their relation, their position in relation to other celestial bodies. So I think perhaps this abrupt climate change in South America, I think that might be a prime example of what's going on here. So 2,160 years ago was right about the dawn or the end of Aries, and then if you keep going back, that would mean between the age of like Cancer or toward the end of Leo, which was Younger Dryas was during Leo. It seems like every 2,000 or so years, something bad goes wrong with the climate. Something happens. Something fluctuates. Anyway, let's continue. So the ancient records of rainfall, including marine sediments, for evidence of exceptional climate events, and it suggests on average an unusually dry or wet year every 16 to 20 years, while under highly variable conditions this increases to every 5 years or so. So again, we have this, they can count on an unusually dry or wet year every decade and a half to 2 decades or so. And they've to come to that conclusion, that has to happen over a prolonged period of time. And humans were assuming that humans were paying attention, which is evident in certain megalithic sites. They just had to be. Then, yeah, they would probably be aware of this, and it would probably figure into their culture in some way. I guess what's going on here is the consolidation of a bunch of clues in terms of cluing us into what the climate was like and how it was changing thousands of years ago, but also more clues from outside geology, like astronomy and position of the stars and precession and all those other things as well. And I think a lot of it, this is a pretty good theory that the patterns of climate it just makes sense to me. It coincides with Earth's position, and that's what precession is, Earth's position and the way it moves. The study of the researchers brings demographic dimension to bear on the understanding of the effects of past climate change and the effects or in the challenges that indigenous South Americans face in different places. So yeah, it is very interesting that they're coming up with all this now, and I'm surprised that it isn't talked about more when the issue of climate change comes up. But honestly, I haven't had a climate change debate with anybody in years, and not even really a discussion either, just because it's such a volatile conversation. It's kind of hard to hang out with people who bring it up, but I don't go out of my way to bring it up. But yeah, it just seems like if precession's the real deal, then it follows that the climate would be cyclical, and it would be part of a longer process of 25,920 years. Well, anyway, let me know what you guys think. That number is found in a bunch of different allegories, a bunch of different stories all over the world. So if you guys know about precession or any of the indigenous tribes, let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys later.